Mm. Okay, hello everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to GEELLE, Grupo de Estudos sobre Educação Linguística em Línguas Estrangeiras. My name is Daniel, and today we have a very nice, lovely, and important session talking about literacies with Doctors Bill Cope, Mary Kalantzis, and Walkyria Monte. So I have this very fast introduction, and this is especially for those who don't know our project. And if you wish to collaborate with us and also to spread the news about our events. So today is this this talk about literacies in times of pandemic, as I said, with Doctors Bill Cope, Mary Kalantzis from Illinois, the University of Illinois, and Walkyria Monte from USP. So thank you very much, Bill, Mary, and Walkyria for being with us this afternoon. And this is our email, okay, geelleusp@gmail.com. And of course, this project is also connected, let's say we are a branch. It's connected with the National Project of Literacies, Language, Culture, Education, and Technology. And the project is coordinated by Professor Walkyria Monte, who's a speaker today, and Professor Limário Menezes de Souza, who talked to us, I think, last month. And this is a 1-decade project already. And here you have the link for the website. So I'll go very fast because we want to listen to Bill, Mary, and Walkyria. These are the talks we have organized so far. So this is and usually one in Portuguese and another one in English. So this was in February, teacher education in times of pandemic. This one was in English, Queer Theory, Education, and Language Education with Robert Mitzi and Joe Windle. Also, this one was in March, in Portuguese again, Internationalization and Teacher Education, Research Projects and Practices in the areas of German, French, and English. So everything is in our channel, GEELLE, okay, Grupo de Estudos, GEELLE Daniel Ferraz, and of course you can help us spread the news. So this one was in April. Teacher education in pandemic times, the contributions of the Spanish area. And this one was in English, Decoloniality and Language Teacher Education with Gabriela Veronelli from Binghamton and Ana Paula Duboc from USP. This one was in May. So here we had Jan Machelin from Catholic University of Leuven and Professor Limário de Souza from the University of São Paulo. And here we talked about teaching in COVID times, the challenges, etc. This one was in English. And finally, we had this one talking about autoethnography in teacher education, mirrors innovation, and unpacking emotions with Fabrício, Fernando, and Luciana. So we have all this. We've had all this so far. We're very happy with all the interactions and the discussions we've done so far. And today we have Bill, Mary, and Walkyria. So after this very brief introduction, we will invite Bill and Mary to talk to you, and then Walkyria, okay? And then in part 2, we invite you to write your questions and comments from YouTube, within the YouTube chat, and we will, of course, select and we will try to ask the questions and also read your comments, okay? Oh, sorry. And to finish, we had in our group, we have the study group before this event. So we read from Bill and Mary this forthcoming chapter, Pedagogies for Digital Learning from Transpositional Grammar to the Literacies of Education. And we also read Foreign Languages Teaching, Education, and New Literacy Studies, Expanding Views by Professor Monte. Okay, guys, so I think this is it. And I will ask Michele to help me. Let me see if I'm doing everything okay here. Was everything okay, Michele? Everything working? Yes? Okay, good. So let's invite Bill and Mary to join us. And hi, Bill. Hi, Mary.
Thank you.
Hello, hello.
Yes, so, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm just trying to share now. Share screen. Share screen was, but it's not getting me to select which screen. So I need to select the window, and I'm going to go. Select the window or screen. Just give me a moment. That one there. No, that's wrong. I don't want to select entire screen. Actually, I can select the entire screen, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to then open the PowerPoint like so, and then you'll see. And is that good? Nice, clean screen.
But we can't see.
No, we can't see you. We won't be able to see them. No, you can't, because they're going to see what they're seeing? A big screen. So that's just
well, Danielle, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm now talking to a picture of Bill, me, and Walkyria, and you. So it's weird. It's very.
So there's no way to see the faces, is there?
It's very weird. We've had to learn.
I'm sorry, Bill and Mary. We cannot see your screen. So something's going on. Yeah, maybe if you I'm sorry, if you could try again, share screen.
I was going to say, we've been involved with this national project now for many, many years, since we first met.
Oh, let me just say, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yes.
So we are just looking at the screen. So since we met Walkyria and then Mario many years ago, we've been traveling with you, and pandemic or no pandemic, the conversations, at least at that level, amongst scholars and researchers and in the higher ed sector, have really intensified rather than anything else. I do, though, feel for teachers in the school sector for whom the COVID was far more disruptive than it was for us. And I have to say, quite honestly, we think we know what we've just experienced, but we haven't had time either to reflect about what it meant in our everyday lives and what it'll mean for the future. But we're continuing those conversations about literacy, continuing those conversations about empowering educators, and continuing those conversations of talking to the next generation of educators, the students who are participating in these programs. And from what you just described, Daniel, certainly you have a rich program for that discussion. So today we're going to revisit, and very briefly, the notion that we've all been dealing with over the years in different ways, the idea of multiliteracies, which I won't go into its history because I think you all know it. But the most important thing that we said at that time, which other people were saying as well, was that meaning making in the age of the digital was, because of the manufacturing, that you can manufacture different modes in the same kind of means, that the future was going to be, is and continues to be multimodal, so that writing and the visual and the spatial and the tactile and the gestural and the audio and the oral, all those things that we understood contributed to meaning making become even more important. You know, the idea that, you know, schools kind of channel everybody just to alphabetical literacies, just to symbolic languages, it's really not going in that direction, because no matter what subject area you're in, the way in which we engage with each other is multimodal, and the context plays a role, right? So it's not just that the modes are different. We have different roles, different relationships, different subject matter, and we have to understand that meaning is multiple and created in that kind of interface between the mode and the context. So the second thing was, of course, that we tried to define what those modes were, the modes that make meaning, and more recently we've become more insistent that these modes shift all the time, that there are transpositions between speech and your body, between image and space, between object and text, and that we need to understand that movement and have a language for interpreting it, not just simply describing it, but having a meta language to know how the shifts occur in the meaning-making modes. And we call these transpositions. So, for example, this sentence, some of you might have heard us use it before. The mountains loomed large. Well, all of you can imagine a mountain. You can imagine how large it is. It's a sentence. It seems to contain all meaning in those words, right? However, this is the mountain that I'm talking about. It's the mountain in my village in Greece. It's my house in the front that I was born. And these are the mountains in my mind. So the image is doing something different than those words. So the mountains loom large can mean anything to anybody who was receiving them. To me, in my mind, when I uttered those words, it was these mountains here. So the same meaning, very different affordances of the mode. In text, meaning is sequential, and the reading path prioritizes time usually. And in an image, you have simultaneous meaning elements together, and it prioritizes space. We could say a lot more about that, but this is just one example that each mode has its affordances, right? And sometimes they're complementary, sometimes they're redundant, and sometimes they're supplementary. And if we're going to have a meta language for understanding multimodality, we need to understand what is similar and what is different. And of course, we came up in the multiliteracies theory with, we didn't want to use the term grammar, traditional grammar, because it was linked to alphabetical or symbolic literacy. So we talked about designs of meaning. We are born into available designs, the language, the sensibilities, the artifacts, the communication tools. We're born into those, and we engage with them. So we're involved in designing meaning. And what we design in the process of designing is a redesign of meaning, because it's never the same as what we receive. And this is a continuous cycle. And we believe it's important to prepare educators to help learners understand that what they bring into the classroom from their background matters, and it's the means on which they build their designs and the creativity in redesigning meaning in powerful ways. So we think, communication is representation, communication, interpretation in a simple way, but our case is that it involves many transpositions, and that we do need a meta language for understanding those transpositions and understanding the power of each mode and each interpretation. So what have we done about it in our own way? We've tried to come up with what that meta language might be, and we call this the functions of meaning. So you can see it on the top here, the meaning forms, which are the modes, the text, image, space, object, body, sound, and speech. And in order to give each one of them the same weight, we have come up with a framework that can analyze them with the same set of questions. So these are our 5 questions. The first one, whether it's text or image or space or object or a mix, is what is this about? What's the reference point, right? Our second question is who or what is involved in doing this? The role of agency, whether it's space or image or object. The third question is, what holds that meaning-making unit together, whatever it is, sound or speech or whatever? What's the structure that keeps it going and gives it coherence? And the fourth question we ask is, what else is this unit of meaning connected to? So what is the context? Because the context makes such a difference in the way that you interpret whatever artifact it is that you're looking at. And finally, equally important as all the other four, and something we used to put aside and call ideology, we call it interest. What is this unit of meaning about? What's it for? What's its purpose? What is it supposed to be? What's the interest-laden nature of it? So we ask those 5 questions about reference, agency, structure, context, and interest across all the modes. And that way we elevate them in terms of a meta language for analysing them in their singularity and in their complexity and in their movements. So I'm going to hand over to Bill now.
Okay, sorry, this is a very funny way to
talk to you.
to talk to yourself, and sorry, we can't see anybody and whatever, so this is and you're probably getting all funny screen messages in as well. Anyhow, not to worry. So I'm going to talk about, okay, what does this mean in the context of the pandemic? So all of a sudden, we've had to become remote to the degree that's possible. And one of the things is that we want to argue is that online is not a synonym for remote. And in fact, online has 2 modalities: in-person with online support. So we might be using digital tools to create multimodal objects. We might be using collaborative tools in the web to work together. And we want to do that whether we're in person or not. So, remote learning online doesn't mean that, online equals remote. That semantics is actually quite an important one. And what I want to do is I want to start with some of the classic textual artifacts. When I say textual, let's not say textual, multimodal artifacts, if you like, of schooling. So one of them is the lecture, right? So here's the person who kind of invented this form of discourse in ancient European times. Socrates and Plato did dialogue. Well, in fact, St. Benedict here, who invented the medieval monastic system, this is a famous quote: "Belongeth to the master to speak and teach, and it becometh to the disciple to sit and silent and listen." Well, how many of you sit silent and listen through video lectures? These forms we can simply move into the digital medium, but still have the same relationships of knowledge where, again, to finish the quote, if you're going to ask a question, and maybe you don't need to, but if you do, ask it with humility and respectful submission. Another classic artifact of modern education, and this is an invention really at about the time of the printing press. This is the first mass-produced textbooks in the 16th century by an author by the name of Petrus Ramus. This is Euclid, and has all the kind of characteristic forms of modern education. So you've broken things into little chunks. There's section 8 and section 9 and section 10, and they're all written in order from simple to hard, and we've got little diagrams that the text is referring to. And we can do e-textbooks and nothing's changed. And then there's this thing called, and by the way, the point about social distance is you silently read the textbook. The point about social distance is you might all be in the same lecture theatre, but you have to silently listen to the lecturer, or you would be, it would be chaos. So here you've got a test, and of course you can't copy from anybody else, you can't bring a book in. This is a very anti-social environment. In fact, there's no social distance in terms of germ spreading, but there's a lot of social distance in terms of the pedagogical constraints that are being constructed in this environment. So this is what we have this is the model of pedagogy that we had there. Hub and spoke kind of model, like a wheel, but except there's no tires. It's just it's just the hub and the spoke. John Dewey called this transmission learning. Freire called this banking education. We know what the model is there. And then online learning arrives, and what happens? Absolutely nothing. These are individual children in the classroom. By the way, on the right here is the first teaching machine ever from 1954, created by B.F. Skinner, the famous behaviourist psychologist. So we can have online learning and nothing changes pedagogically. We just reproduce these old forms of pedagogy. Now, with the work we've been doing with Scholar, we've been trying to do something different. And I would like to show you into Scholar and illustrate some of the points Mary made about multimodality and pedagogy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the conclusion in the PowerPoint because this is awkward. I'm nervous about this whole video transmission system. This is what we want to produce in Scholar. So didactic pedagogy was transmission of content. Now, most importantly, it was cognitivist. This really was about your memory and long-term memory. And you know, the classic thing was, what's the definition of long-term memory? It's until the day after the exam when you can happily forget it. But it's also very individualistic. You might be sitting in the lecture theatre, you might be reading the textbook, you might be doing the test, but it's not premised on interaction. Whereas what we want to try and do in an environment like the Scholar environment, which I'm about to show you very briefly now, is something that we call reflexive pedagogy. You know, the two-ended arrows are the reflexive part, where students are involved as active knowledge makers. It's ergative, which is from the Greek word about work, which is we're focused on work artifacts. We're focused on the knowledge artifacts, which are actually media artifacts, multimodal media artifacts that you create. And we can probably infer something about your thinking about that, but what we're going to look at when we assess your work is the products, the things you produce, the projects and the artifacts. And it's highly social, obviously. So what I'm going to do, and by the way, that's the kind of our conclusion, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump out into the, and let me see if I can just show so I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to reshare and see if I can just share a window now. So share screen, select the window or screen, and I'm going to select the window or screen, presentations. No, it's only going to let me share folders.
Just
So
describe it, maybe, Bill.
a bit hard to describe. I will try to share. Normally I can share a window. Select the window or screen. Okay, but the trouble is it's only got folders there.
But if you show when you click share screen, everything you see in your computer we see.
I know, but also this window, I've got a big screen and it doesn't. It's hard to size up. So I really need to show only Firefox. So in other words, it's only allowing me to show windows, not that have been opened in the system, and not, for example. I'm going to try and let's just see how it goes. So I'm going to allow, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to size this up. As a matter of fact, what I might, I didn't mean to do that. Just give me a second. I might pull that to the middle, right? And then what I might do is sizing it up won't work because everything in the browser will size up.
We'll focus on the
Okay, ignore all the other clutter.
Okay.
in my life. Can you see that okay, Daniel and Walkyria?
Yes.
Right. So this is Scholar. Most of it's open, and it's entirely open to you folks if you want to see it. The social side of it is we have an activity stream here, and this I just opened a second ago. It's just stuff that's happening in courses that we're doing, and what it is, it's the opposite of what happens in a video lecture. And it's the opposite of what happens with St. Benedict when he has his disciples watching him. So if I'm going to go down in one of these classes now, and I'm going to show you where, I'm going to just scroll down just for a second and find something here. So, here is, no, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm just going to look down here because there's been a lot of stuff happening in the last day or so. That's the Letramentos thing where Rodrigo's working. Sorry, folks, I'm just going to go down. I'm trying to find something that's interesting to illustrate a point. I'm going to illustrate this point here. So I haven't even looked at this, so it's going to be a surprise to see what it is. This is one of the students in one of our classes talking about doing I'm just looking at the infographic, analysing literature through an elevator pitch. So one of the things about Mary and my classes, and when did she post this? It must have been posted, actually that timestamp I don't think is correct. So anyhow, interesting thing, it's an infographic. And the first thing you see is the infographic. You don't read the text right away. So she's put in an infographic, she's put in some references, she might have put in a video. So what we've got is, I've never thought about doing a novel elevator pitch for a novel ever before. So we have students involved in the co-design of the class. So in this particular week, we're talking about a particular topic, and she's given this example of the class. So it's multimodal, it's social, and what's interesting is here are the other people commenting on what she said. So it's building a dialogue where everybody speaks. Compare that to St. Benedict, one person speaks and the disciples listen. Let me go over now to another page, and then I'm going to stop. This here is a multimodal work that one of our students is creating in the creator space. And here what we've got is, again, look at it, it's full of infographics. It's got it's got videos embedded. So here's an example about bilingualism where the students found a video and she's quoted it in line there. And another video, and then a text, and then more videos, and then conclusions. So this is a multimodal work. But along the way, there's been all this feedback that's come in. So in other words, you can see here, this person's given a lot of feedback, this person's given a lot of feedback, and if I want to give feedback, I can do this. So this is very social. We've got students reviewing each other's work, giving it score, giving feedback. So every piece of work that's produced in the class is social. Right. And one last point, to say farewell to the test, we have an analytics area which data mines the work that students are doing. And I'm going to go into that course, which actually only began about a week ago. And my computer's being a bit slow. And I'm going to go into here, that same course, 560, and it's only just begun. So let me do a little search here. So what we're doing is all this activity, all this social activity that's going on in that space. Yeah, and here, it's only just begun. Maybe this is not a good example.
That's okay.
It's not very filled out, that's all. So what happens is here is that the amount of work that's happened in the class is 100 is the circumference of the circle. And if I go over any of these, every student has their own one. We can see the amount of work that's been done, and we can see on various measures how your work's going to be measured, right? So what we're doing is we're data mining this, and already even only 1 week into the course, in fact, this only began on Monday, this course, there have been 2,000 pieces of actionable feedback. And we've got 385,000 data points at the back there.
Across 3 domains. One which is knowledge, right, which is the building up of the content and the theories and ideas. The other one is focus. And in the online environment, you need to know the degree to which students are engaged. Interacting. And finally, help. In the new world, we've got to collaborate, we've got to work together. So we value and grade help, the quality and the degree of help that students give each other is a third of the grade. And these 3 components indicate what we value as educators in the online space.
And as every student has one of their own, and as these things grow, you get closer to the course objectives. So you start off with 0, and if you get to 85, it's an A.
And all learners can reach whatever grade they want, because they can see it evolving and they can improve in the areas that will give them higher grade.
But
in different
remember
areas.
that individualised test where the people have the blinkers? This is people collaborating in their own assessment, giving each other feedback. So it's a transparent, collaborative process, and it's based on the work that you do, not what you can remember. Right? It's not based on. It's based on work artifacts.
The educator can set this up in any way they want.
Okay, folks, we've managed to get done. We promised we wouldn't. We'd leave plenty of time for Walkyria as well. So, and I'm sorry it was a strange presentation because
you cannot see the chat. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mary. I will also bring Walkyria. And as Walkyria get prepared, I just would like to make some links to, as Walkyria gets prepared to Walkyria's presentation. So one of the comments that we had from both texts you sent, that it is always this, at least for me, trying always to advance by bringing the new, but also renewing. And something that students commented is this didactic frames. Of course, they have to be contextualized to every Brazilian context. And I think this is the danger when, because of course, both of you, we at least within the Projeto Nacional, the National Project of Literacies, and also in Portuguese, for Portuguese teachers, we have read probably many of your works. And I think that some people, they might confuse this as all of these didactic frames, like the first image Bill showed, like the Bibles, and that's not the point. It's always to see how this fits the context, right? And I like about both texts this idea of the designing, but it is also linguistic, so it has to do with language. It has to do with sociological aspects and philosophical. So this was very interesting. I'd like to give you this feedback. And the third point is we've been talking, of course, you guys been talking, and we've been talking about this for some decades now. You know, literacies, multiliteracies, new technologies. And now, under this pressure of emergency remote teaching, and unfortunately, with this very sad pandemic, people in education, they have been paying more attention to this or trying to get to know. And I see this as something very, very positive. And I really like that image that Bill showed about the classroom, and also this metaphor of the new wine. New bottles, but old wines. I think this from Lancashire Noble. And then this is the idea. It's again the very same old banking education, but transformed and transferred into the online settings. And this is something. This is why students are also complaining. You know, Bill and Mary, because I think they accepted their reality. They are trying to deal with the digital, the online. But at the same time, we see the other way in which the classes are pretty much in the very old educational paradigm. And just to finish, this is why I think Scholar is there are a lot of potentialities, because we've been following, and there's the partnership of USP and Illinois, because of the collaboration. We still haven't gotten used to just the professor, and here I'm talking about university teacher education, the professor being the evaluator, the center, and so when students are peer reviewing each other, it's just, to get some marks. It's not like the real social things happening, right? So thank you very much for your talk. I don't know if Walkyria would like to comment on their presentation. Hello, Walkyria.
Yes.
Hello. Welcome.
Hello, Mary, Bill, and Daniel. So thank you very much for participating in this team. And, I like very much, your design of assessment. I really think it's very innovative. And I think also that we have to get used to that. I was really writing down something not to forget, that is to practice responsibility, shared responsibility of our learning, right? Collective learning. Students in our let's say situation in Brazil, students are very much, students and teachers, I think, and parents and directors and everybody that is involved in schools, they are very much used to having somebody responsible for the assessment, as if that person could be the only one, right? That could do that. But I really think this is so important. And also something that we've been researching in relation to scholar, the proposal of scholar here in Brazil, and this is done in Rodrigo Abrantes Silva's research, PhD research, showing how possible it is to have a platform in which we can do things collectively, right? So it is really what we call horizontal hierarchy here, right? Because we can share responsibility, we can learn with the others. However, it's taking time for people to get used to that as well. So your platform is very different from what we are used to as a platform here. It's not a Facebook platform. It's not nothing like that. It's a very educational one. So I'd like to highlight these two aspects in relation to the research that you've been doing, right?
Thank you, Valkyria. So
Say
Valkyria,
something.
oh, sorry, yeah, of course, Mary, of course.
Yes, I mean, our platform is our research. It's putting our words into action and testing it, right? So that's what we're trying to do. And to demonstrate to all those other people who have LMSs, it's possible to do it, right? And so that's why we do it. The other point, Daniel, for you, we talk about repertoires. There's no single answer to any pedagogy. Sometimes you need adaptive, sometimes you need reflexive, but the point is that you need to know each student, you need to know your subject, and you need to be a professional with a repertoire and move in and out. Now, and for that you need collaborative teaching as well as collaborative learning. So if we're honest about student-centered, what does that mean? If we're honest about collaborative learning, we need new architectures and new meta language. And that's what we offer. And we know it's hard because our own students take 1, 2, 3 terms sometimes to share with others and improve the work of others because it's a big social change.
Let me just correct myself. When I mentioned the didactic frames, because didactic pedagogy, I was talking about the infrarian terms. You offer with both of these texts very pedagogical frames, you know,
Yes.
and they are very, very interesting. And for me, they always have to be contextualized, of course, you know. And this is the challenge for the future teachers, right?
Yes.
So thank you, Bill Murray. We are going to to invite you in a while after Valkyria's presentation. And Valkyria, are you ready? So Valkyria, thank you very much for being here with us and joining Bill and Mary in this discussion. And let's see, I'll be here as a helper, as a support. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, we can see.
Yes, we're all together today discussing literacies in times of pandemic, and I gave a subtitle to my talk as well because I wanted to go back to the designing social futures in your multiliteracies book, right? I think that was an important publication because it was able to bring us a certain light at the end of the tunnel when we were very much looking for new ideas or innovative ideas in relation to education, trying to find other ways different from the traditional or conventional education that we were all used to by that time. So I really believe that in that book, you bring a views of society and discuss, and you all discuss changes, right, that you had been observing in society by that time. And I think they are really undeniable social transformations, right? And three, let's say, theoretic designs, I mean, that you bring in that publication in relation to life worlds, in relation to work, public and civic lives, and personal lives, that made us think very much about lots of transformation here, right? But going back to this view of society that you brought us in relation to changes, I'm joining it to putting it together with the times of pandemics that we have now, and making a connection and relating it to certain uncertainties that we have all been living now at this very moment, right? I really think that those concepts were very important, right? All those social, let's say, concepts were very important for us to think about our realities in Brazil, about our contexts in Brazil. And I'm not going to refer to all of them, but I would like to give our reasons or our thinkings about public and civic concept of society from the three, out of the three that you mentioned over there. Such as, I think that you have perceived an intricate way in the working and public and personal lives in citizens. And I had a chance later on to write, let's say, a reflection about the changes that I had been observing in Brazil by that time. See? So this was my publication in 2007, right? So this is something that I would like to call the attention, to one observation that I had by that time in relation to the civic. In Brazil, we were all very much used to understanding the civic related to our duties, for example, and our rights. This is very much what the law, for example, would teach us, right, in relation to what is allowed to us. And I was exactly working on the idea of active citizenship, right? So how could I explain those changes, right, to our teachers, to the school teachers that we were working with, and to our students, right? So I decided to make a kind of a contrast to them. So referring to the Independence Day parade that we used to see, right, in our towns. So this is usually celebrated on September 7 in Brazil. So, and this is a picture of the 1922 Independence Day celebration, right? It was exactly, this was exactly the time of Independence Day here in Brazil. And this place here is very well known in São Paulo. It's called Avenida Tiradentes, right? Uh, where the Independence Day parade is used to happen, right, by that time. So later on, I saw this picture that showed the celebration of our 150th anniversary of Independence Day in Brazil. Now this time on Avenida Paulista, right, which is a very well-known avenue nowadays in Brazil, where we are probably all going to a manifestation tomorrow, for example, right? It is where the political scenario happens here in São Paulo most of the times, right? So what do I call the attention of the people in relation to these pictures? So we would see that these parades were celebrated by the military, and they would happen on the public space of big avenues, occupying this public space, right, here in São Paulo. And the audience, I mean, the civilians, and would be invited to go there and see them as a way to learn about uniformity, discipline, standardization, and to see this kind of aesthetics, right? So, what happens later then? What happens is that kind of manifestation that used to occur on public avenues, on huge public avenues, were moved to another private space. Just to make you familiar with this is the Sambódromo in São Paulo. If you recall that, it is the place where Carnival happens here in São Paulo. So where we have the escolas de samba, right, showing, okay. And then we started having this kind of parade, the military parade, the Independence Day celebration, moved to this kind of space, right? It seems that we have millions of people here, but we don't. It's usually just, let's say, thousands of people go to this place because then they have to take buses or subway or drive their cars to go to this place in order to see the celebration, right? And to participate in this idea of what civic life is like, right? So we would see this kind of parade over there. However, as time passed, we started observing that this kind of parade or this kind of manifestation wouldn't attract so many people anymore. And we could kind of interpret that it wouldn't attract people because people would not feel identified with this kind of movement or with this kind of celebration, right? On the contrary, they started participating in another kind of parade, and this is now the Avenida Paulista, where we first would see, where you used to see the Independence Day parade years before, right? So now this is the Gay Pride Parade that is celebrated with millions of people, right, over there, see? And probably we can affirm that the identification with diversity, plurality, has been much greater in the last decades. So for this reason, when we started discussing the changes in society that were proposed in the book Multiliteracies, we sort of had the idea that we had advanced, right? This advance between quotations when we say that it seems that we started understanding this idea of pluralization that we've all been living nowadays, right? And feeling much more comfortable with this. And we were leaving behind those hard days that we had lived decades ago in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? So everybody seemed to feel much more comfortable with this kind of civic concept, right? See, here again, we see one more picture of the million people that would be participating in the Gay Pride Parade, usually in June on Paulista, on Avenida Paulista, right? But why is this so important? Why discussing the civic is so important to us now? Because it is very much connected to the idea of pandemics, right? Of course, that we cannot do this during the pandemics anymore. However, we have another scenario lately, right, that makes us think that we live a certain kind of revival, right? A revival of old days in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? This is a picture showing a motorcade. This happened last Sunday, right? And this is how then the public space has been occupied, I would say, right? Making us feel all sad and disappointed and frustrated, right? And it is at the same time the principle, the idea of society, the view of society that has been connected to the pandemics, because it's a view of society that does not pay attention to the conflicts of pandemics that we have all been living lately, right? This picture has been in the social networks. This picture has been associated to this old one that was taken in 1933, right? When Mussolini was in a motorcade leading a manifestation in favor of fascism 90 years ago, right? So this has been very much present in the social media as well. Okay, so coming back to this view of society associated to the problems of pandemic, why do we all think that this uncertainty is leading us to rethink and to resist and to rethink the times that we've been having so far? The idea of pandemic seems to be sweeping under the carpet two of the main social issues and views of society together with the pandemic that we've all been suffering. One is related to the 460,000 deaths that we've had so far, right? I mean, with the virus in this in the times of the virus, and it has at the same time been sweeping education under the carpet, right? As well. Uh, why? Because it has been denying the lots of problems that have come to surface, right, or to the forefront to all of us. That is showing inequalities, right? Showing how the differences and social differences in Brazil really, really interrupt, the projects of education that we all want to have. Okay, so resistance and rethinking have been our challenge lately because we have to resist to all of this, and but at the same time we have a chance to rethink, right? To rethink of what? And then I go back to Copen Kalantzis in their publication of 2000, when they advert that these new discourses can be taken in two different ways, as opening new educational and social possibilities, or as new systems of mind control or exploitation. This is this in this picture here. I just put it here not to forget that Brazil has been opening military schools all over. I mean, in every state, in many cities at the same time. So, what is our fear is exactly the new systems of mind control or exploitation instead of having the opening for new education and social possibilities, right? And in this same publication, you leave a challenging question for reflection. That is, how do we transform incrementally the achievable and apt outcomes of schooling, right? And see, at the in 2000, you were already anticipating. It seems a lot of the conflicts that we have nowadays. And this sentence can make us think, and this sentence can make us reflect about opening new education and social possibilities. And I myself have been very much engaged in understanding how the written language society lives with the digital society, right? Together, when before we used to concentrate only on the privilege and the priority of the written language society, and nowadays we have both of them together, making me think about another education project for the future. It seems that it's high time we thought of a new educational project, right, for society. Although we do not know how to start, where to start, how to start, and where the conditions are yet, but we have to think of it. So this is the reason why I hope it is. We have another project, however, that it is not another break in the wall, right? It cannot be another break in the wall. Just for this other project, I would like to suggest, not suggest, I would like to tell you about some of the questions that I have to myself and invite you all to think about them, and maybe we can have our discussion after that, such as, are we going to study 4 hours per day? Are we going to study 8 hours per day? Are we going to teach 8 hours per day? Are we going to have just one teacher per discipline from now on, or in a future project of education? Um, School classes every day? Should we have a school class? Should we attend classes every day? Are we going to keep up having box-like classrooms? Are we going to study in buildings? Are we going to have hybrid teaching and learning that is now in remote education and also in presential education? Are we going to follow Eurocentric curriculum? Are we going to have a core curriculum? Does it make sense in a country with the dimension that our country has? Is Why do we have 12 years of basic education? Is this really better to everyone? Are we going to have 4 or 5 years of higher education? Are we going to have basic and higher education? And I would continue interrogating about what we have at the moment. And I would love to have other people, sharing the same interrogations and the same, ideas with me, so that we can probably start thinking of another project of education for the future, right? So I leave the questions with all of you and maybe we can discuss them, right? Thank you very much. Okay, my
Thank
contacts
you.
are all here. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Valkyria. Thank you so much. Um, we can maybe, Michelle, can we invite Bill and Mary to join us? And one thing that caught, well, many things caught my attention, Valkyria, but I think this idea of diversities, it should always be emphasized and should be in the backstage, in the backgrounds of our conversations, especially in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
But and when you talked about the crisis, I think this very, very tiny book, very, very, very short book, I think it's 50, 70 pages by Boaventura de Souza Santos, the Portuguese philosopher, and he talks. It's the cruel pedagogy of the virus, and he talks about the three main crises that modernity, we as modern nation states and citizens and educators have to face, which is the patriarchy, the colonialism, and capitalism. So your talk reminded me of these big challenges that we have to face, together with the pandemic in Brazil, together with all the sadness that we have seen every time we talk to our families, friends, students, and we see the news. So thank you very much. Bill, Mary, would you like to join us to join with Valkyria's presentation?
Yes, Walkyria, those questions are the questions, right? And if the pandemic has made them more clear, then that's a good thing. But how do we go forward? I was thinking as you were talking, connecting back to our talk, if you took those three images of the gatherings and you asked the 5 questions of each one, what was the reference? What's the agency? What's the structure? What's the context? And important, in whose interest? So the 5 questions that we posited about making meaning, we need to understand it, not just to say this is to the kids, this is capitalism, this is pressure. Get them to interrogate what each image represents. And if you take a traditional classroom and take a different kind of classroom, and then ask the same questions, in whose interest? Whose interests are served? What is the structure? What is the context? Where's the agency? Where's the reference? So, these are questions we put together for language, Daniel. This is about language, interrogating language. But because you can also interrogate multimodality, you can interrogate events, you can interrogate images. And we need to train our kids not just to listen to different voices, fake news, true news, but to have the tools to come and understand the relationship of interest to structure and context and agency and reference. So we need new tools, Walkyria, but you are asking the right questions and we need to do that now.
Mm-hmm. Think so. Think so, really. But it was important that this kind of proposal related to literacies, I'm including then literacies, multiliteracies, new literacies, and critical literacies, all of the terms. have really, brought us, fresh air to rethink, education, really. So we had been thinking about that. We knew that there was something that wouldn't work, that was not working. But then I think all of those publications, reflections could make us think a little further, right?
Okay.
Straight after this at 12:30, I'm sitting on a dissertation committee for Vania Castro, one of your students from the university. You have a generation of young people there who are outstanding, who understand the technology, who understand the power of it, who understand how you overcome remoteness and multilingualism in order to give voice and agency. I'm just floored. And her professors, people like you have produce this generation of young people. I think I am very hopeful. And in countries like yours in Brazil, where things are harder, you have to think in much more complex ways. And this is just one student, but I'm sure there are many, many more like that you guys have produced.
Oh, yes, I think so. We do have more.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, can you put us, the three of us, together without the dance of... Yes, lovely. Thank you, Michelle. Bill, Mary, Walkyria, I think this is a very important, let's say, encounter, because you guys, as I said, are not only read, but discussed. There are many comments. I won't be able to read all of them because I'd like to jump to the questions, but Asuero Marcos Alves, he said, Mary, Bill, congratulations on your excellent work. You inspire us. The University of Ceará in the northeast of Brazil study group has been working on researching multiliteracies in Brazilian context. Walkyria, congratulations. Okay, let me just start with the questions, and then you guys decide who wants to start, who wishes to start. I think the first three questions are about this reflexive teaching, or the reflexive educator. So Janaína, she asked, you mentioned didactic pedagogy in contrast with the reflexive one. How could you explain some contrasts or small differences between what you call authentic pedagogy and the reflexive one? And I think I'm going to ask two more because they're very connected. Vanessa Pereira, I'm a Spanish teacher, but I will try to ask in English. Let me just tell you that, guys, you can ask in Portuguese, we will translate, and English is our language of communication here, okay? Because many people send me emails, and we unfortunately didn't have time and funding, let's say, for simultaneous translation between Portuguese and English. Maybe one day we can do that with pleasure. Could you talk more about the relationship between Paulo Freire and the reflexive pedagogy, please? Thank you. And another one about this ideas on reflexive pedagogy from Alessandra Fernandes. What are some points regarding the reflexive pedagogy that may help teachers plan their classes in a digital environment? So, guys, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, look, I'll start if you like. So, the point about obviously, what Freire does is describe traditional, the banking model, where you're getting filled with content and you're a relatively passive receptor. I mean, the reflexive thing is around social interaction, and the very good point about the kind of subtle difference between that and authentic. One of the issues about authentic is you can do stuff which is true to people's realities, but there's something wrong with their realities. If their realities are deep inequality, if you're authentic, you don't necessarily actively try to change that. So the reflexive thing is an interaction which can push things forward, and it might push things forward in one of two ways. One is access, which is leaving the world of inequality the way it is. You might get access to something you didn't have before. Or what you might do is by interrogating interest, for example, the point that Mary just made, you might end up with a critical perspective which leads you to action. So one of our critiques of authentic pedagogy and constructivism too, to be quite frank, is they don't necessarily have an agenda around change. And as I say, that can be personal change, personal transformation, but also it can be social change as well. So that's a kind of a subtle point. Now, to Alessandra's point about digital pedagogy, one of our arguments is progressive pedagogues have told us to do this for a century. Freire's told us to do this. But so did Maria Montessori, and so did John Dewey. And if you want to go back 2 centuries or 3 centuries, so did Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And why didn't it happen? Well, the reason why it didn't happen is partly related to the economics and pragmatics of schools. I liked your metaphor of the box, Walkyria. What we did is we put a whole lot of kids in a box because their parents were working, right? And it was a thing where in modern society, you needed to put them in a box all day. And when you put 30 or 50 people in a box, what can you do? They all have to be quiet while you speak and they listen. Right? That's what happens in boxes. And if you want them to, the banking model for Freire again, you give them the textbook and you tell them to remember it and you do a test, right? So in a way, what we built is a communications architecture around that institutional form. And that was the cheapest and most convenient thing to do. It was cheap and it was convenient.
And control.
And it suited all the issues of control as well. Now, what the digital stuff does is, and someone made the point about getting access to devices. Well, if digital tools are made as to work on browsers, right, web browsers, and if we have phones now which have browsers on them, or if we can get cheap devices, somehow or other in this pandemic, a lot of people managed to get their hands on devices. So that's happening. If we can do that, we've got the tools for social interaction. We've got the tools for collaboration. We've got the tools for multimodal construction of knowledge. You don't have to sit and listen to the damn teacher or sit and read the damn textbook. You can actually look stuff up on the web, go to Wikipedia, find resources, look it up on communities, and reassemble things, which is the design idea. Yeah. So the answer is...
Anywhere, anytime.
The digital tools, and all we have to do as teachers is scaffold that. Now, when I say all, it's another job. It's a different job. It's different to using the textbook. It's different to giving lectures. Teachers have a new job. But once they have that new job, we have the tools to do it. So that's our answer about to the digital tools question.
We are left with the duty of care. Putting kids in boxes, had that duty of care. The state, the public school would look after your children, not necessarily educate them. It would reproduce them wherever they were. That was its role because it didn't have the resources. The architecture didn't allow anything else. So we still have to figure out, Walkyria, the duty of care. How do we, in this more open environment with access to information and knowledge in each other, we have to think differently about that duty of care. How do we create discerning learners in the online environment? How do we get predators off that space? How do we have collectivities of adults in relationship with kids? It really does, Walkyria's questions are exactly correct. You have to blow open the box. Once you blow open the box, it's not just language, it's not just literacy, it's not just curriculum, it's duty of care and responsibility. And who's going to do that? I mean, those of us in higher education have to work with policymakers, with students, with kids to kind of move in that direction or create some space to demonstrate how it works, because if we can't create, demonstrate, like that's what we did with Scholar. We just created a space, we said, look, this works. So we have to do that. We have to create it in a village or, in a community or in a suburb somewhere, work to then write it up and tell it, because change requires a movement, not just the right answers, right? And a movement requires a demonstration. Go on, Walkyria.
Something I'd like to call the attention is in relation. There is echo. in relation to the term authentic. I think that some years ago, Mary, Bill, and we discussed this idea of authentic in Brazil. The difficulty for people to assimilate the concept authentic pedagogy is the idea that what is authentic, remember, I think that you don't probably remember everything, of course, years ago, but anyway, it is an authentic between quotation, I would say, right? Authentic meaning that it goes to the original idea of what pedagogy would be like, right? So it's not the term itself, right, but the concept.
Okay. Let's see here if Michele can help me. We still have some minutes, so let's try to ask some more questions. Michele, I'm doing Clarice, yeah. So here she said, geralmente os professores não têm consciência de que as aulas deles são teacher-centered. Muitos acham que ao utilizar recursos tecnológicos, por exemplo, já estão trabalhando de outro modo student-centered. So let me try to translate here. So usually, teachers are not aware that their classes are teacher-centered. So many of them think that just by using, this is my interpretation here, my translation, just by using the technological resources, for example, they are already working in not, let's say, not in a student-centered mode, let's say that this is. And I'd like to connect with Vanessa's question. Prefarias, yes, sorry, Prefarias. Let me see here. Here. How to put these strategies into practice without access to technological tools such as Scholar. So this is another one. And finally, they are all connected to teacher education, let's say. That's why we're putting them together. Vocês não acham que a formação de professores deveria ser a primeira a mudar em relação ao teacher-centered para mostrar aos novos professores que há novas formas diferentes de ensinar e aprender? So here the idea is, don't you think that the teacher education should be the first one to change in relation to this aspect of the teacher-centered, so that it can show the new teachers that there are other ways and different ways of teaching and learning? So thank you very much.
Teacher education is also tied into this architecture. It trains for what is, right? With a little bit of philosophical kind of discussion about what might be. So there is a tension. However, I want to say, you don't have to have a Scholar platform, but you do have to break open the box. That means teachers collaborating, as well as student collaborating, sharing responsibilities. Some people creating tools that allow for reflexivity, that allow for agency. One teacher, 30 kids, one teacher, 100 kids. You can't do it. It's impossible. So you need a principal and you need a district that says, let's experiment without harming the kids. Work with the university, open up our rooms, change the timetable, right? The 40-minute block or the 50-minute. These are things we can do. I mean, Summerhill talked about them, Freire talked about them. They're possible, but you have to have the courage to do them, and it takes some reorganization. Routines are easier, so we do our routines, go home. Right? So it takes some courage.
Want to say something, Bill, or?
No.
He's speechless.
I want to make a comment on this idea of a student-centered and teacher-centered curriculum, this idea, or teacher education, for example. It seems that the pandemic is also making us rethink this idea of student-centered or teacher-centered, because I've been reading other proposals related now to something that is called world-centered curriculum or world-centered education, connecting students to the world or to the planet or to what is really worth in life, for example. and making them also see the interests behind this kind of structure that we have in schooling, for example, right? So, and this is something that we can probably, go ahead thinking, right?
I think if you're okay, we have some maybe two more. Let's see here. Michelle, can you help me? We're doing Blazer. Okay. So this is Dear Valkyria, but I think it's for Bill and Mary too. Bill, Mary, if you would like to join Valkyria. What kind of future schools we should expect for the next generation of students according to your studies? And then we can do Susanna. Susanna's question. Thank you, Susanna. Very relevant discussion, Valkyria, on how public space is occupied. How can social movements reconquer public space occupied by neo-fascist movements? Michele, there is another one here that I'm seeing the chat. Guys, there are many questions. Oh my God, and comments, but unfortunately, we won't have time. I will send the questions to Bill, Mary, and Valkyrie. Okay, guys, I
Oh
promise
yeah,
I can
thank
do
you.
that. There's another one, Michele, connected to this idea of the future generation. Here, here, this one. From Wallison Costa. Do you think Valkyria again? Do you think we can establish parallels between some aspects of your enjoyable presentation and the new alfabetização baseada na ciência ABC by Mackey? This new national plan. And Bill and Mary, just to contextualize, we're going back decades now because the whole concept of literacies is being extinguished, vanished from the national educational policies, literally the word education, and they're going back to before Freire's time, this idea of literacy of the word, of the code. So there's this huge debate now, and also the first two questions thinking about the future. What do you guys see? Think according to your studies. Thank you.
These we need a long time for these
I
discussions.
think
But
so.
Juliana said something the school of the future needs to treat learners as humans. Human beings don't have to put their hands up to go to the toilet. Human beings don't have to put their hand up to talk to each other. So just those simple things, if we think like that, how do we create the spaces? Even in America, I go into schools and I feel like I'm going into a prison. It's so regimented with the bells ringing and the teachers frustrated and the kids, kind of bursting to, because these are different human beings, and the school was not set up for the human beings that we are raising as our children and our grandchildren or our neighbours. And we're not taking into account their needs at all, whether it's with the new technology or their sensibilities. So we do have to think of a more open human space. That has to be first, but human for the teachers too. So the responsibility of one teacher for 30 is not human, right? It's not decent. One parent looking after 30 kids, how would you do it? Imagine it, let alone in a classroom. These are kind of ordinary things that we have to understand, in order to kind of influence the kind of change we need. But it's hard to change systems. So you have to do it little bit, so it's viral, right?
That's right.
And prove it. And then we have to trumpet it out, So you kind of do it in that kind of way because there's too much money in buildings, too much money in teachers, too much money in textbooks,
That's right.
But we need to have these discussions, even these are philosophical as well as pragmatic. But we've got to move from the philosophy to the pragmatism, and sometimes they inspire us to do something that we feel we can't.
Yeah, raising hand, huh? Okay. Just because you mentioned, one idea I have is, for example, maybe we could have, pilot schools between quotation, in every capital, for example, just to experiment something different. A school that is not structured the way that the traditional ones are, right? So this is something that I always think about this possibility. But how can we do this, But anyway, I hope that sometime we're going to have a chance to propose something like this, right? To have pilot schools, a few of them at least. But I do not think that my idea is not that we should eliminate this traditional school, right? I always think that they can, work together, not together, but they can coexist. That's the idea, right? There are people who are going to have this kind of preference, but maybe we can start breaking a bit this circle, right? This educational circle by implementing a new concept of schooling. Whether this idea of schooling is really so important, I think it has to change also.
Can I say one more point about the future? We will not have a planet. We will not have a humanity. Yes, we can have all the military skills in the world, and we can have all the didactic skills in the world. We're going to produce the same kind of people who can't think and can't solve problems together and can't love each other. So we are at a really crisis point, and the pandemic, which is wiping out people, we're going to have more pandemics.
Oh yeah.
Given how we live. So at which point do we say the planet matters? At which point do we say humanity matters? And that these solutions that parents want for their kids to achieve, what world are they going to inherit? What world is out there for them? This was a wake-up call. The pandemic was a wake-up call, right, for us. And what it upturned the whole world and made economics useless, made work in offices useless, made teaching at schools. It was possible to turn everything upside down. So that's a positive thing at one end, that this could happen, and we could kind of start thinking about ways of the future. Anyway, I have to go because I have to go on the committee now for one of the Brazilian students.
So we're just going to say thank you, Bill, Mary, and Walkyria, for such inspiring talks and conversations. It was very fast. We need to do this again.
And, you are wonderful colleagues. You are wonderful, inspiring colleagues.
I will send you the comments. So Camila, Clara, Beatriz, Mariana, Eliana, Zahia, Hayani, thank you very much for your wonderful comments and questions. Let me just show you very, very quickly, just 1 minute, please, before I finish. Next encounter will be in June, and we will talk about language education and teacher education. Anti-racist language education and teacher education with Aparecida Jesus Ferreira, Gabriel Nascimento, and Joel Window. Okay, it's going to be the 11th of June. We'll send you the information on the social media. Bill, Mary, Walkyria, thank you very, very much. Big kiss, grande abraço, warm hug.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody. Abraços. Thank you, everybody, for being with us this afternoon. It was very, very